Great, thank you for that. So just to recap, the folks who are watching the recording, this is a conversation between us, Quality, and Jeff, who's leading the demo systems from sales, and we are figuring out how we can work together to create a mechanism that we can spin up demo projects and also test data easily in GitLab as a feature. And I think we were discussing how to structure this, so I'll pass it on to Jeff to run through what he was pointing out just now. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. So where we're coming at from the approach of this is right now the QA team and the quality, or do you prefer quality or QA?
Quality.
Okay. The quality team has some demo data generators that are very comparable to what you'd see with unit testing, where it's doing faker data and things of that nature, and generating a lot of random data to see does this work when I try to import it in. On the customer success side of things, we're trying to build a little more of a contribution model where other people can bring data to us. We have created a prototype of a demo data designer, and what this is doing is it provides a UI for building sample projects and then has the ability to run through what those are. And what our conversation today is figuring out how our teams can join forces on what we're trying to accomplish. Because right now the demo designer is not part of the GitLab product. We're trying to figure out where do we meet in the middle with an initiative that Sid has expressed interest in. When you go and you create a new project in the GitLab UI, you should be able to import a demo project. So we're trying to figure out the nuts and bolts of how to do that. And where our discussion is at right now is when you go to create a new project and you go to create it from template, right now we have these built-in templates that are essentially base models of the different language frameworks. And we're discussing the possibility of having a demo projects tab in here that would be populated with one or more sample projects that are pre-populated with issues, merge requests, labels, everything kind of in a current state, so you could see what a full GitLab implementation looks like without actually having to implement it yourself and get in quickly. One of the constraints that we're faced with is that works well for someone who's the first time ever seeing GitLab and they just want to tinker around in a sandbox. For our customer success team, we do a lot more higher touch engagements with customers. We're customizing demos. We're doing more of a modular approach and picking and choosing what we show, aligned with our use cases that marketing has put out, as well as just some of the story that we're trying to tell. And the big challenge that we're faced with is when you use faker data, you don't have control of the story being told. And so we're discussing what are the options of creating what that story looks like, our Acme company and what the products the Acme company has, and what that looks like for for the samples that we're going with. And so we're playing with ideas. This is all a work in progress. It's all in pencil right now, but that's just kind of the recap of where we're at so far. So picking back off where we left off, Mick. So if we go and look at demo data, how does it import? What does it import? I think one of the things we should look at is, can we build off of that GitLab CI file from the infrastructure as code type of design model? Mm-hmm. So that no matter how the data gets generated, right? It could be that at a unit test level, all this gets generated. Right now, this is basically running, shell commands, right? How can we put it in where we can use more of a Terraform model that actually has, nested, dependencies and things of that nature, where a model is one where it's a demo data language of sorts, right? To bring that in.
That really speaks to me. I think I mentioned in the issue as well. Like I was envisioning data as code, where the language of describing the demo data, and I also want to say it is really relevant to our test data. Right now, our test data is very fragmented. We don't have a UI that can hey, this is test user one and all of that, and start to manipulate things on a design aspect, not implementing. Right. So coming into the top level view, I think it's great. So yeah, I think that really speaks to us. I think a YAML structure-ish that describes the structure of groups, projects, users, and how the CI is configured. I think that's a great start. And then what is that? It's kind of would that be a working solution, you think?
I think so. Right now I feel more comfortable on the JSON side of things than I do on the YAML, just because we're working with an API. So my head stays there, but I understand that YAML is, basically a lot of what the GitLab, competency is in terms of a community. I'm curious to connect the dots on this to some of the code that's been written so far for what we're doing, because all we end up doing is having a database model that stores these records, right? And so if I look at it from the, pardon while I work my way through this repo to pull up some of the files for it. So if we look at the create issues for this, my file structures are all, I have to look at the thing to see if I can find where it is. Designer, I'll grab that one. So when we look at this, all we're doing is we have on the demo designer a database, MySQL database that has the values in it. And then we're using reference objects of what it ties to, right? So when we actually go in and we're creating these different objects, this is where I think the dependency design challenge is going to cause problems for us. Oh, did I kill it out? There it goes. When I look at a playbook and I'm trying to create an issue, you're choosing a lot of dependencies, right? So you're choosing milestones that already exist. You're choosing ethics, you're choosing labels that exist. One of the things that I think we'll run into with any sort of YAML or JSON or any sort of text is the parent object being created. And this is why I mentioned Terraform, because Terraform, it has a parsing engine to understand what the dependencies are. And I worry about that from a demo data perspective, is that we need a dependency management system of some kind, because you can't, create an issue with something and then, no type of label in, label doesn't exist. We can do it auto detection, but then you end up with inconsistencies, right? You might end up with, instead of the 6 labels we have here, you end up with 25 random labels that Faker came up with, right? So that's the main concern I have with that.
I think we just have to pick one data model and see if the implementation can solve it. And if that one data model, if we solve all of that, I think we can solve probably a majority of the other models. But that's a great call out. Does the PHP engine that you have right now, is it just like a creation wizard for additional data models?
Correct, yeah. And so it's just providing a UI to build a data model that then gets parsed through and runs API calls, right? And so this is the create project issues here. It's going, and this is right here, this is all date calculations, right? And this is looking at all those dependencies. If it has a milestone, go get the milestone, get the ID of the milestone from the GitLab database, grab that milestone ID, and then use the SDK to then populate it in with those ID numbers or with those relative calculated dates, right? Now, what we can do with this is, instead of populating an API, this could then, I could do do you want to import this into GitLab using the API, or do you want to export this as a JSON or YAML file? And then parse this out, and then I can use the engine I have, because I already know what my dependencies are here, to sequence it. So it'll always ensure that from top to bottom, all your dependencies are up top and all your other records are down below, right? So it knows it already exists.
Got it. Okay.
One option.
I wasn't planning to dive into the technical details, but happy to. I think that we could lessen the complexity here if we were to help enhance the export import mechanism to like, for example, the dates, like the create dates, all that could essentially be dynamic. And what you're dealing with on this side is essentially relative numbers. For example, if you were to create a project, right, on you want to set a due date, instead of setting a static date, it could be like, set a due date 2 weeks after the project was created. So you just have to worry about the relativeness of time versus a static stake in the ground.
Right. And that's what we do here. That's what this whole system is about, right? Is we use January 1st, 2020 as our today date when you do an import. And then whatever you plug in, it does a sub day or an add date based on that, right?
Got it. Yep. Yeah.
So
I think
we've crossed that bridge already to some degree, right?
Yeah. So if we were to make this if we want to leverage the rake task and the import export the import export should be able to handle this. And is that the concern? Because from reading the blockers so far, the things that are preventing us from using import export is the making sure the dynamic nature of things are created correctly. Because right now it's a very high touch from the.
It's one of several challenges, yes. So the dates are part of it. The thing is that the dates are going to appear in different places. And so the question would be is when you import it in, you'd almost need some sort of mechanism to read through, okay, this project had a start date of July 1st of 2019, and it has timestamps that are all throughout it. What you want to understand then is you want to have some future casting, right? So is your date the date it was exported? Is that can become today's value? Or is it one where you want to say, I let things populate through here, but I need to go do a reset in time? And that's the challenge that you're going to run into is how do you choose today's value? Do you let the user pick, right? And then how do you dynamically shift those dates and how do you shift them across all records with the right dependency controls?
I think that the start date could be something we provide in the demo import mechanism, and that's the date that gets created for everything if you don't specify like I don't think it's wise to capture relative mechanisms. I think we're just going to ingest what the demo data structure is, but when you create the in the GitLab feature version, you can either create it then, or you can create it and specify a date where that's the global date that everything else is going to piggyback from. And thinking from the technical aspects of that, we need to augment the import export mechanism, add the ability to set those dates from the start in those controllers. Because right now it's just, if it's 2018, I'm just going to create 2018. And there has to be like an if else where, okay, this is under the export demo project or test project. We're going to create it on this date. And then there's some logic to like, if it's not specified, use today's date. If it's specified, use that date. I think that's like the main crux of the time.
It is, yeah, and that's what I try to solve with this iteration. And it's working for what I'm doing today, right? And so you can go through the exercise that you need to think through the engineering challenge on the Rails side of it. But it's the relative date does make it easier to do an add and sub. It's just the sprawl of all the dates that you're going to run into some challenges with, and catching all of them is the big thing. The other piece that we're also working on that is beyond the scope of our first iteration of a project template is we're looking at ongoing project demo data where we actually have scheduled events that happen. So a background job is looking for that relative date and says in 6 days from now, it's going to do a commit at 1 p.m., 3 p.m., and 5 p.m. with failed pipeline jobs. So we're also doing scheduled future dating as well for an ongoing perpetual demo. Right, that's outside the scope of this, but whatever design is used should factor that in for a future, code perspective.
I agree. I think CI schedule is something of a weak spot in I would even say the test data coverage, because right now it's just created on the fly. Something that's like in the background running is something we want to solve even in our staging environments. For context. So I think we're aligned on that. That takes care of the import export mechanism and dates. What else is the other thing that we need to touch on in terms of the missing export import pieces? I think you mentioned CI configurations and a few others, correct?
There's quite a bit of it. There's a piece of technical discovery. I don't know what I don't know at the moment. But when I look at like what's in place right now that I've tested, the issues, issue boards, and labels, they're all working just fine, right? When I get into some of the branches and the commits, I might run into API weaknesses of what I'm working on that I don't know, right? And I might find, how do you dynamically modify certain things? Now, I think this is where I'm going to look at some of how the performance tools that your team has built, how they do it, can I adopt that? Do we need something different, and why? I haven't gone through that discovery process yet to know. But let me see if I believe we had some stuff going on here. So was there something that was missed? we'll come back to the contribution side in a minute.
I think you mentioned group levels, nested projects.
Yeah, and that's something that right now, that functionality does not exist at all. At least I've never seen it. Am I wrong on that?
I think we're treating you as a customer and requirements. So if you said
Sure.
that's the case, then I think we're missing, because I don't believe that import export is covers everything. I'm sure that there's some gaps around there.
Yeah, because I've never seen a group level import or export. I've never seen the UI ever, so I don't know if it exists or not. But just to show, I'll show you an example just for use case analysis here. Is if we look at Link is one of our solution architects, and he has different projects that he does. And so this is a parent organization that he's demoing, and they have sub projects that are doing different things in, right? But at this level, the group, he has epics and such that are in here, they're at the group level, that are all tied to the sub projects. So whatever import capabilities, this is a big considering factor, is how do we bring that in? And then how do we tie it into the relative, obviously the roadmaps and such are generated based on the date values and the epics and the issues. But that's one of the big things we have to look at, is how, let's just say, let's not underestimate how much the group might involve some more complexity than we think it is today.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. I see. Yeah. After seeing this, I see the value of branding of each demo data to fit the customer base. So I think the first iteration should be that you give us that one demo data set that is generic, and we should work on first iteration just being able to just populate that data set as a GitLab feature. And we will leave the others as is right now, because we don't want to be blocking anybody's work. I think we can have a common, like in math, it's like the least common denominator. That thing, and then make sure all the import export tasks can solve all that. I think that's a great first step. And
yeah, so let's put it this way: is from the generation. So let's break it into three components, right? We have the user creation of the data. And that's what the demo designer is doing. It's allowing you to form out what your project is going to look like. We have the export into a common format. That's YAML, if it's JSON. It basically ends up in a master text file that could then be re-rendered as curl calls or anything of that nature. And then the third part is, how do we take that text file and import it into GitLab as a product? If it's in that create import, if it's the import from template area. And basically that button there is going to read those text files, and then we can have a repository with multiple files in it. And GitLab as a product will simply read from those, and we can use source control to maintain those templates.
Bingo, yes.
Does that line up clearly?
Yeah, that lines up clear. So the output of that, I think it should be YAML, because YAML is a lot more descriptive, but I think we can deal with the technicalities.
I just got to play with that. I need to go through and do a POC to see if I find any fallacies with that, but I don't have a problem with the YAML conceptually.
Right. I think that's a great iteration. The way we treat dependencies, right? I think GitLab, the product, will treat those those text file demo test data definitions as a dependency. And I think if we do this right, a few iterations from now, it might even have to be like, hey, this is like a release 1.0 that gets packaged with GitLab 13.5, and now you have this list of demo projects you can just like boop, 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 and then just populate it. And then it's going to be ongoing. We'll treat this as a dependency as we bake it into the product. I think that's a great approach.
I think it is. It solves that demo data as code approach that people are looking for as everyone to contribute, and then it's not dependent on the the demo designer is simply a tool to make my team's life easier, right? But the output of it.
The output of it, correct. I think it's very ambitious to rebuild the demo data designer in GitLab right now. I mean,
I don't think that's worth it. Right now.
I think right now is to solve the provisional aspect of it. Okay,
Yeah.
so I think we do have a few action items, and just for context for people on the call, I'm going to send this to some of the folks that may be open to be working with us. I give a heads up to Tim Salmon, the director of engineering on the dev side of product. So like create, plan, manage, so that all issue things. And he's happily to help involve the team that's working on the import mechanism to help as well. So it might be in the shape of a working group when we get more traction of it. Right now, I'm still in the I think it's still in the requirements gathering phase and planning out what we are going to be building. And I think we are like 80% there in terms of requirements ish. So let's recap. We have 1 minute left. So Jeff, if you can send us that one project you think that's a great candidate to cover like the first iteration of what you want to see. If you have this, I want to see this populated correctly every time. That'd be great. I'm going to run point on the rest of the engineering on how do we solve the timestamp and how do we solve subgroups and CI configurations. I think that's a great first start.
Okay. So adding on to that is, give you a group so you can see what a group looks like when it's imported. You can work on the requirements around how groups get imported. I can give you the sample that Link has right now. I don't think that should be the gold standard, but it's something to at least you do a proof of concept with as a baseline, right? There's demo data story that's still being drafted around it, and so we'll end up with the what is that right approach in the coming weeks. The other aspect is, from my side, I will work on exporting into YAML and then give you samples in YAML and saying, here's the YAML, and then here's what the GitLab project is. Can you get this to match and import and match that test? I'll take a first stab at the YAML structure, and then we can do some iterations upon naming conventions, organization, whatever, what have you, and kind of go from there. But I'll take that as my action item, is to export what I'm doing from the demo designer into basically a YAML script of sorts that would be structured the same way a curl call would be in terms of sequencing. Does that work?
That works. So I'm writing it down in the issue, and then we'll again we'll figure out the missing components that needs to be in the import export mechanism. So dates and subgroups and CI, and I'll run through 2 possible individuals that can help us with this, and then we'll maybe touch base again maybe next week or a week and a half after all this is ready for us to digest again.
Sure. Yeah, and I'm starting a sprint next week. It might be later next week. I've had a couple delays for other unrelated projects, but my goal is to end up with the proof of concept with this by the end of June or the first week of July. And so the hope is, from a progress milestone, at least we'll have all those pieces. I do not know the YAML output, what we might run into. I don't know if they'll be ready in 2 weeks. It'll be ready in 4 weeks. But I think basically I'll call it a proof of concept. And then once we have the proof of concept, it'll be easier for your team to work off of. So. Yep,
that'd be great. That'd be great.
Cool.
API resources. Okay. Is there anything that we need to know on this, like you call them sprints that you're working on? So is the doc essentially what is going to be making its way into the designer portal, or is it more on the...
So what'll end up happening is twofold. So there's a comment toward the bottom. It's all the same issues, but sometimes the timeline's moved around. So the adding of project and group level API to the demo designer. The section, the API resources for demo designer in that doc, I'm going to copy it into that issue. But it shows you which API resources I'm going to be building for the June 2020 iteration.
Okay, so this API, it's not the product, is it, or is it the product?
That's the GitLab API, and so I actually go to the GitLab API resources documentation. Okay. So everything's built upon that, and all I'm doing is copying that data model onto the PHP set for the demo designer, and then allowing that to create all the resources and then populate them in a dynamic generated way. Right. So that's all that's happening. So all the things that I'm putting in as functionality are there under the sub bullets in the doc. that'll move into the issue in the coming days. And then the add generated sample data using the marketing persona is the second half of that doc in terms of what the story we're telling, who the fake company, the products, what the products are doing, who the people are that are performing the actions, commits, etc. The project template, that's going to be both I'm going to be able to import this in and export out a template just as a tar. At the same time, I'm going to extend that issue to include the YAML. So that's the scope change that we have today.
Got it. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
It has me thinking whether if I know we were discussing rake task, and I want to dig into it further, maybe with the help of the development folks. Sure. If the import export is limited in functionality, maybe this provisioning mechanism should just be like a task inside GitLab that calls all the external APIs. If the APIs we're building have already those added functionality, so it's not like one shebang where you import everything, but it's more like, hey, it's a sequence of API calls, and we build on top. We go with the API.
And that's what all the code I'm building, that's what that does. So feel free to use that as a model for looking through that, because an eventuality, a future iteration could be go to project import, and it gives you a summary of all of the things in this. Like, here's all the groups that are there, there's all that, and it has checkboxes, and you choose what to import.
Exactly. Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Right.
And we want to use that for our stuff, like performance data. We want to have it as a checkbox when you create. Hey, I don't want demo data, I want quality test data. I want test data from quality, and then this is another checkbox, and you can set up really easily. Yeah. Okay. So I think we have really good traction here. So let's run point on that, and then I will also give this recording to Tim Salmon, and then the team is currently working on the import.
Okay. Cool. And I'll have some pretty good progress later in June. I'm happy to sync before then, but in terms of actual outputs that will be valuable to you, I think that'll be the milestone is the end of June.
Cool. That the day works. So we have time to work on the thing.
Cool.
Fronts.
Cool. Very good. Anything else?
That's it. Kyle, do you have anything to add?
No, I appreciate all the information. Just being a fly on the wall and seeing how we can help with this. Thank you for letting me tag along.
Cool. Thanks, Jeff. Have a good weekend. This was really productive, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Have a good one, guys. Cheers.
Thanks. Bye.
Yep.